Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. Thank you for that. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here representing New Hope Counseling. We are currently, our new office is at the Tower of Hope, which is very excited. If any of you want to come visit us at the 12th floor, we have a beautiful view and a great staff. I've had the privilege of being with Catholic Charities for 9 years now. I am their full-time clinical director, and we primarily work with interns. We have a small amount of full-time employees, associates who are on their way of becoming licensed like myself, but we primarily work with universities in the aspect of training. So those that we help are people that are within the mild to moderate diagnosis, meaning that they're not severe with a lot of the suicidal ideations where they need higher level of care, because we are an entry-level agency. Like Mark was saying, the need is huge. We turn away around 60 individuals a month because of the need, and the majority are Spanish speakers. We do offer our services in both English and Spanish, and we're hoping to grow in the Vietnamese language as well, but it is a struggle to find qualified people who want to serve in this capacity. So today is the beginning of what is mental health, and I just wanted to start with a brief general overview, and it starts a lot with our own self-reflection of where do we stand with our own mental health. How am I in that aspect of my life? Because we don't necessarily focus our lives or pay attention as much to what is mental health. And it's one of the aspects of who we are. As much as we are physical bodies and spiritual bodies, we also have a mental or social emotional aspect of our lives. And if we're not nurturing ourselves well enough in that aspect, it can have some negative impairments in other aspects of our life. Does that make sense? Perfect. So just a few, some data for you to raise your awareness. So about 1 in 4 adults will suffer from a diagnosable mental disorder in a given year. Now the key here is that it's diagnosable. All of us can struggle in and out with symptoms of anxiety, nervousness, worry, for example, or symptoms of depression, some trouble with concentration, some trouble with motivation, difficulty sleeping, for example. But it doesn't mean that it's the full-on diagnosis, right? Only a clinician who has experience in mental health, whether it's a psychologist, psychiatrist, LCSW like myself, or a marriage family therapist can provide a diagnosis like this. Now, a lot of times our general doctors can also give a diagnosis, but they don't have the training that is equivalent to a licensed clinician like myself. So although it's a good place to start, if we can't reach a licensed mental health clinician, I would encourage that you follow up with one of us, okay? So mental health, like I mentioned, is our emotional, psychological, spiritual, and social well-being. So think about our emotions, our thoughts are always going to affect the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave. So there's always a triangular connection between our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. It's going to determine how we handle stressful, difficult situations, or just our day-to-day, whether there's stress or not. And mental health starts at the very beginning. It starts in utero, right? The way that mother is carrying that baby, the environment that she is in, the amount of support that she's getting is already impacting that baby. So it starts from that very beginning, and it goes with us until the very end of our lives. And I think that is something that we can all understand. Here's a few myths about what is mental health. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I think it's important to raise the awareness because there's so much stigma, yes, on mental health. It's it's a taboo. We don't talk about it. Nobody wants to share that I have a child with bipolar, right? Nobody wants to share that I have a son who has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because it's such a thing that is outside of the norm that we keep it to ourselves. And so that secrecy, that stigma is what prevents the proper processing of something that can be easily treatable, that's something that is workable. So one of the takeaways that I invite all of you to have after this morning is to understand the importance of talking about those difficult mental health circumstances within your own home environment, within your parishes, within your community. Have conversation with your pastors about how do we bring this topic up in our centers of work, in our centers that are faith-based. One of the big myths about mental health is that it doesn't impact me. So think about your day-to-day functioning, because this is how we determine if there's a full-on diagnosis or not. How do you sleep? How do you concentrate throughout the day? How do you communicate or express your emotions? And think of your family members. Think of your children as you're going through this. What do you notice with them? Is there a lot of self-doubt? Have you noticed a pattern of multiple jobs? Have you noticed the difficulty of being in social environments with different people that you don't know? Because that can pertain to social anxiety, for example. Mental health problems do impact us. It just depends on the intensity and the duration of how long you've been experiencing what you've been experiencing. Does that make sense? Okay? And you may not have a history of mental health in your family. Sometimes the genetics does play a part in what you present and what you manifest. But sometimes there's a difficult experience, whether traumatic or not, that impacts what you do. So if, for example, if you're a police officer or if you're in that area, the constant exposure to all that difficult, sad things that happen can create vicarious trauma in you. So now you're having some difficulty sleeping, you're having these memories, you're becoming worried for your family members, their safety, things like that. So it's something that can come out of the blue in some ways, okay? People with mental health needs, even those who are managing their mental illness, cannot tolerate the stress of holding down a job. That's also a myth. A lot of people manage with or without medication to hold jobs, but a lot of times we think of them as our homeless outside on the streets who struggle a lot, but it doesn't mean that every person with a mental health illness or a diagnosis of one is not going to be able to hold a job, okay? There's no hope for people with mental health problems. Once a friend or family member develops mental health problems, he or she will never recover. This contributes to that stigma because it's so taboo and we're not talking about it. We are delaying finding help. I currently have a mom, she's a principal in one of our schools, who is seeking help for one of her children. And it's not uncommon that it's put off and it's put off, and then they come to a center like our place for a crisis. And that is a struggle. We see this a lot in couples, right? They're trying to work it out. There's usually troubles with miscommunication, but because they're not giving them enough attention at the very beginning, they come to us in a crisis, and they're at the verge of a divorce. And so they come to us with that need of, help us, what do we do? And they want the response and the change to happen immediately. And that's not the reality of how mental health works. Mental health is a process. Mental health is a journey. So it's not a one time, it's not a 6 weeks necessarily. It depends on the situation of the individual, but it's based on that therapeutic relationship that is developed. If you don't trust me, we're going to go nowhere, right? So I build that relationship with you in order to walk you through that healing journey, and it takes time. So if you are perceiving that somebody that you know, somebody that you work with is off for whatever reason, right? Your gut is telling you something. Do as best as you can to inquire with that person, and do the best that you can to recommend that they at least visit and get evaluated by a counselor. Now, an evaluation doesn't mean it's not a medical thing, right? It's a conversation. That's really what it is. Tell me your story. Tell me what's going on. What brings you here? What can I do to help you? That's the essence of what mental health does. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Therapy and self-help are a waste of time. Why bother when you can just take a pill? That's another myth. Medication helps, and a lot of times there's even an additional stigma about medication. Unfortunately, some of them have side effects that are uncomfortable, but what medication does is it provides, it takes off the edge of the intensity of the feelings that one is having. So like with the migraine, right? Migraines, anybody have had migraines? Okay, they're very painful, right? So if you don't take a migraine, right, you can be bedridden, if you don't take medicine for a migraine, you can be bedridden, right? It's like you can't even see light, you have to be in the dark. I had a history of struggling with migraines in my much younger days. I'm still young. And it was very painful and very uncomfortable. And had it not been because I was in treatment, who knows where I would be. But even taking the Advil, right, or the Tylenol or whatever it is, takes the edge off that you can function and go about a little bit more of what your day consists of. It's the same thing with medication. Are there risks with addiction? Perhaps, but it all depends on what medicine you take and the conversations that you're having with your psychiatrist, right? If we try to do things independently on our own, then that's where the struggle can be even worse, because we don't necessarily have the skills or the tools to be able to help ourselves 100%. Does that make sense? So please know that medication is helpful. A medication is not meant to harm. It's meant to ease some of the pain that is happening for that mental health challenge. And it's mostly given for anxiety. It's mostly given for depression. Okay? A person with mental illness lacks faith. I hear this a lot through the parish presentations that we go. Part of what Catholic Charities is also trying to do is promote that bridge between psychology and faith, because they do work beautifully together. But we hear this from parishioners that say, you know, I went to a priest, I went to confession, or I talked to my BFF, and what they tell me is that I don't have faith. You know, I'm still struggling with the sadness. I'm afraid of, you know, what my spouse may do, and they tell me to keep praying, I'm not praying hard enough. That is a huge myth. Yes, sir?
Yeah, that's so right. Did Jesus never talk about bipolar or schizophrenic, or he just said demons or get in my grace, right? So frequent the sacraments, and it will help, but I'm sure there's instances where...
Right. Well, some things are pathological, right? And we always encourage the faith because it's what can ground us, right? Turning to prayer, whether we go to daily mass or however we take advantage of the different sacraments, definitely help reduce some of the symptoms. But when someone is being told, well, you don't have enough faith, it just shuts them down. They're being judged. Do you hear that? You don't have enough faith. Why are you still struggling with your sadness? It's been 3 years since your partner died. You should be better. You're not praying enough. So judgmental. So we need to really stop and think, where am I coming from in my desire to help someone, especially if I'm going to use faith? It can never come across as judgmental or in terms of saying you're not praying enough. More like, let me pray with you. Or I know of this novena. Can we try that, for example? But it's not meant to be a source of magic either, because sometimes faith is misunderstood as a magical way of overcoming our mental health challenges, and it isn't. Okay? We implement the faith in ways of being able to mortify when we know that the situation is not going to be fully, not repairable, but improved. Okay? There's so much beauty in our Catholic faith that can be utilized to help the process of either overcoming the mental health challenge or just managing better. And sometimes a lot of it is just education of being able to tell our individuals there can be a balance. You can live with your depression and still have your faith and still manage to do your day-to-day activities at home or in the work office. Are there any here that stand out for any of you? Any from this that stand out?
I have a question.
Yes.
You know, you talk about medication. Is there a way to strike a balance between standard Western type of medication versus maybe a natural, more holistic?
That's an excellent question. There is, in the supplemental way, as far as I understand, it just takes a much longer process, but it is doable.
What is?
So things like even acupuncture, for example, can help reduce anxiety. So rather than taking an anti-anxiety medication, you can find a whole, what are they called, holistic doctor that has experience, and whether it's acupuncture or some different supplement, they can help reduce the symptoms of anxiety. So for attention deficit hyperactivity, very common ADHD, there's a lot of nutritional ways to try to help reduce it. You know, a lot of people talk about omega-3s, how that can help. There's just such a variety. Our Western society does a lot, prioritizes more of the medication rather than natural ways to try to heal, right? So either way, it depends.
That's the question. The medication doesn't heal. It masks,
It
mitigates,
it-
or minimizes.
But it stabilizes as well.
How do you heal?
With the therapy. So it's a combination of therapy and medication, because as I can't provide medication, but I can provide with the specific tools on how a person can manage that fear of a panic attack, for example. We talk about helping recognize what could be the trigger, how do we anticipate it, how do you manage it in session with me so that you know that you are safe, so that you know that nobody's gonna harm you. How do we breathe together? What do you tell yourself? So those are the tools that therapy provides, that medication doesn't do. Okay, and the idea is to help get you better, right? We can never guarantee, 100% you're gonna be free from your anxiety because there's so much involved in the complexity of it, depending on the stage where we find them, right? Children are gonna respond differently, teenagers, adults, and older adults, right? But we understand developmentally where they're at, and the constant repetition, the constant training, and the constant trust in that relationship allows for an improvement to a reduction of those symptoms. Does that make sense? So a lot of it is just educating yourself. A lot of it is trial by error as well, especially when it comes with ADHD. And you just somehow, through patience and a lot of persistence, you get to a better place. But preventive work, obviously, is much better than waiting to be hit with a crisis. Okay? All right. So these are some of the things that we try to assess or work with our clients at the agency. We go through a mental health checklist to see where they're at in terms of that functioning. That gives us an indication of, as a clinician, we have to diagnose. It's just a formality, really, but it's really to help give us a compass in terms of the type of goals that we can create with our clients, so that they see the progress and that they feel empowered that I'm doing better now, right? I'm sleeping better, for example, or I'm less afraid of speaking in public, which are some of the things that we help.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think there's a bias out there, and I know it's a bias that I have because of my work.
Mm-hmm. What do you do, sir?
I'm a judge.
Okay.
I've been in family law, I'm in guardianship, I'm in mental health. I am on the select committee that put together all of the rules for the CARE Act.
Wonderful.
I'm right in the middle of it. Okay.
Wonderful.
I understand early child development. I teach it. We have a huge crisis because the majority of the kids that go through family court are little, between the ages of 0 and 7, and the state has stopped keeping data. We have no data in California on divorce or any of this. They stopped keeping it. So there's hardly any discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, first of all, somebody has to want to get help, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you, my bias is I'm not inclined to go or refer or want to refer to a secular psychologist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's my bias.
Yeah, no, I hear
Okay?
that. Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm inclined to want to go to a Christian-based,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because they have a more broad, holistic approach to
Mm-hmm.
this, right?
Yes,
Is
yes.
that an accurate bias? Is
Yes,
that a
no,
fair bias?
it is a fair bias, and we get that a lot. And thank you for being so honest about that. This is who we primarily attract because we're Catholic Charities and because we have a Catholic foundation in the counseling that we do. So yes, I often get
We
that.
need to talk, but not here.
Okay. Sure, thank you. I'm not going to go in detail with this because we have a short amount of time, but just be aware that the invitation here is for you to do a self-inventory. Where am I at with my own mental health? Okay? Where am I at with my moods? Where am I at with the way I communicate things? Do I come from a place of anger and frustration and tiredness? That's me, tiredness. My poor kids.
Did you say tired?
Tired, yes. Do I come from a place of tired? Fatigue, yes, sir, fatigue. Where's my energy at? And is it based because of me feeling fatigue, or what is it based from, right? Am I having some memories come back? If any of us have struggled with, difficult upbringing, sometimes that is still what is called our baggage, right? And not that it has to be fully resolved, but does it impact my ability to, be present with my children, to be present with my spouse?
Couldn't we, at what point is there a threshold you're saying, all right, there's a mental issue here? Because I could probably check 3 or 4.
Yes. but that's, no, I'm glad you bring that up because that's all of us, right? Remember how at the beginning I told you we all have something of something, but it doesn't mean that it's pathological. It doesn't mean that it's diagnosable. And that's because it all depends on the frequency, the intensity, and the impact in your life. So that's what you have to monitor. right? I mean, and you have to be honest with yourselves, right? These are part of the questions that we ask to figure it out. How frequently do you struggle with your mood swings? Can you keep a diary for me to let me know how that varies? Because that can give me an indication of, okay, are we looking at bipolar? What are we looking at, right? Are we looking about manic episodes? Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe it's just because, you know, you had a fight with your spouse and it's thrown you off, or there's been a death in your family. Maybe you lost a job, or you're getting ready to change jobs, or whatever it is, right? All that can have an impact on us. So it's about how long, and these are the specific questions that a mental health clinician will help you figure out.
I have a question.
Yes?
So before anyone goes to your clinic or speaks to a psychologist and gets prescribed, you know, medication or anything, do they go through the checklist of what cures like 99% of all illnesses, which is like sunshine and gym and church, and you know, like
a holistic
lots
approach
of, yeah. So isn't that like the most effective way? Because if I go on Google and I put in, you know, any illness, there's so many, you know, symptoms that will resonate with so many people, and then they'll start to feel as though, oh, I have this, or I have, you know, I'm dying, like,
Yes.
because Google said I was.
Yes,
But
we get that as well, yes.
for the most part, I think, yeah, in general, like, what's the most,
Right.
you know, just basic.
It varies. It varies, because the beauty with mental health is that there's so many different theoretical modalities and so many different approaches that, at least I can only speak for our agency, because I come from that eclectic background where I know a little bit of all this multitude of theories, and we are an education-based facility. We tailor it to you. So if I realize that you're going to benefit more from what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, then that's the approach that I'm going to have for you. But if I notice that that's not working, I'm going to go more, I'm going to switch it to acceptance commitment therapy, that modality, to help you be present and accept and focus on your values, et cetera, et cetera. So it really just depends on the individual and the intensity of what you are presenting, right? But a lot of it entails practice on your part, because you're only coming to our therapy session traditionally once a week. Now, our modality also varies, just because I have that freedom to do things a little bit differently. But the traditional therapy is only once a week. In my opinion, it's just not enough. Okay?
I know Western, or what medicine in general has changed, you know, entirely from when it began, because Catholics built like hospitals, and a lot of Medicare was, you know, free holistic health or whatnot, but now, you know, the pharmaceutical industry is totally geared for keeping patients, or not saying that your, you know, clinic is, I'm just saying in general, it's like good to be mindful of that, and to not, you know, to allow people to know that. Right. Well, you know,
any good clinician always has to assess if who they're helping and the tools that they have are being effective, because every session we're evaluating that level of effectiveness, how helpful we're being, but we also need to you know, assess, am I working within my scope of practice? So I'm not trained to help people with substance abuse. I don't have that level of training. So our agency does not work with folks who struggle with substance abuse. I don't work with people who have personality disorders either, because I am not trained to provide that level of help, and it requires more than just one individual, right? You need to be able to work with a psychiatrist alongside, and you know, psychologists who do testing, et cetera, et cetera. So we know our limits, and every clinician should know what their limits are, because we're looking out for the best interest of the individual. So if I can't help with the modality, and I've had them 2 years in counseling and they're not where they need to be, I'm going to provide referrals for them to go elsewhere. That's what the ethics are of being a clinician. But we're always, hopefully most, will tailor it to the individual and what it is that presenting, and always assessing whether they're going to, if it's helpful enough or not. Yes?
Do you find that a lot of the people that come in with a lot of the symptoms or problems are self-medicating, and they're not?
No.
So you don't find them having addictions or using drugs or alcohol? Or
No, not the ones that come to us. On the contrary, it's more of refusing to even contemplate medication. So they've struggled with depression for years. They've struggled with anxiety for years, right, which are the two big umbrellas. And, they're at a point of crisis where really medication will help, again, to reduce some of that intensity, and they won't even consider it. That's who we get.
Those are the kind of people.
That's who we get, yes. Yes, and because we identify very early if there's a history of substance abuse, or they're currently, or if at any point during the session, this is, something that comes up to us. Our protocol is you need to be connected with either an AA or an addiction group, depending on what that addiction is, in order for counseling to be effective. So we don't have the training for it, and we're very transparent about it, but we will continue to help them until they are connected and plugged into other resources.
Well, also you talked about the trust issue.
Yes.
The relationship. And usually when you're talking about, once a week
Mm-hmm.
and that minimal time
Mm-hmm.
and introduction to people, it's usually not enough.
Yes.
To
Right.
have somebody feel comfortable and
Yes.
trusting. And also too, like everything else, different people for different people.
Yes.
So I see in a lot of ways that that's caused a problem
Mm-hmm.
in mental health, services for people,
Mm-hmm.
that they don't feel like there's going to be any
Right.
positive result.
Right.
There's not going to be any light at the end of the tunnel,
Right.
so to speak.
Right.
Because it's not that it takes too long, it's that there's fault in the process.
Sure.
You can't.
Sure.
How do you trust the person?
Sure, but that's part of the journey,
Yes.
right? That's
Yes.
that's part of the journey. This is part of what is communicated to folks when they walk in. There's a lot of education involved of understanding realistic expectations of what counseling can do and what counseling is not. We're also, I forgot to mention, we're also at seven parochial schools, Catholic schools, doing preventive work, working with children K through 8th grade to try to help them overcome some of the challenges. And I know our judge stepped out, but the number one reason why we see children at our Catholic schools is because of the impact of divorce and separation, which is tough, right? We're thinking of Catholic home environments, and that's the number one reason. The second reason why we see them is because of grief. Whether it's the grief related to the separation of their parents or a grief of a lost family member, somebody that's close to them. And the third reason, top reason why we see children at school is for behavioral challenges such as attention deficit, tantruming, struggle with their anger, things like that. Okay, but we're also at our schools, and it's a big goal of the agency to want to reach out more to at least start, aiding some of the wounds that our little ones have. So that in itself is a message of hope, but that's what clinicians do, right? You coming to my agency or seeing one of my therapists is we are instruments of hope. We don't let you walk out in a state where you're not stable, right? And the fact that you're coming back means that there is a motivation and a desire for that individual to get better, and we help them see that inner resiliency that we all have, but even more so our clients. So it's a complex, multiple, facet, thank you, process, but it's meant always to be of help. And when we realize we can no longer help, then that's when the referrals kick in. Right now, as a social worker, we do a lot of figuring out support systems, because it's important. Outside of me, the clinician, who else can you turn to that can help you in a situation of crises? We strategize with safety plans, if you're suicidal, what it is that you can do. That's when we break confidentiality. Do you guys all understand the concept of confidentiality? Because that's the key to building that trusting relationship in that therapeutic environment. But that's broken when there's suspicion of abuse, obviously, and when there's suspicion of suicidality, self-harm like that.
Question.
Yes.
So our Lord Jesus never said that there won't be depression and anxiety, right? I'm just saying, isn't that part of the process? I'm just kidding, honestly, because I know that's in everybody's life. I think everybody has that level of depression or anxiety. I struggle with it at times as well, but I mean, it's part of the process, right? So it's joy in the depression, it's hope in the despair, right? So is the clinic geared towards giving, insight into catechized? Because I feel if people were catechized, with the good foundation, that roots out like 90% of most problems. I'm not saying bad things don't happen to good Catholics, but I mean.
So to answer that,
that's the reality.
and I appreciate how faith grounded you are. So for those of our clients, right, and it's not for everyone. So we welcome everybody from any denomination, any walk of life. But we identify if one of those strengths is faith, then we're going to work with that faith. And a lot, especially our Hispanic and Spanish speakers, that's their core. So we will dive into it and help explore it and understand what their relationship with God is and utilize things as the saints to help them. But we don't catechize because that's not the role of a mental health therapist. That's the role of a spiritual director. So we will explore, do you have a favorite prayer that you go to? What is your understanding of suffering, for example? Is this a cross that you're carrying? And are you joining that, right, with God, for example? Do you have a saint that you look up to? Right? So those are the ways that we integrate the faith, but we don't preach the Bible. We don't quote directly from the Bible because that's not our role as mental health clinicians. We can provide referrals to spiritual direction when we notice that they will benefit from that, or if they have a trusting relationship with their pastor, their deacon, or let's just say, I'm thinking marriage encounter, if they have them in their parish, then those are better places to collaborate with, if that makes sense, to help that individual or that couple work through the challenges that they're being faced. And speaking of that, so when we go out to our parishes to give this similar presentation, these are just 4 of the saints that we bring about that we know that struggled with mental health. And this is, again, a way for us to provide hope. So we say if these folks struggle the way you're struggling and are in heaven, more of a reason for us to embrace those crosses, to embrace that suffering, knowing that our reward is in heaven. And you can feel it in the room where everybody's like, like, yes, to be able to hear it, to be able to know that in my fragility, right, in my doubt, I have the ability to get to heaven as well, is very, very helpful. Okay? All right. These are just, these are just some 3 that stood out to me in terms of prayers regarding mental health. But we can just say something from our heart, right? It's not necessarily what comes from the Bible, but it's really our relationship with God and how do we want to nurture that and what is it that we say, right? My go-to prayer is always be still. For you are God, for he is God. That's one of my go-tos. And I think we all have our go-tos, right? Whether it's the Hail Mary, it doesn't matter. But being able to ground ourselves in that ability is very helpful when it comes to any struggle, right? And more so when it comes to mental health, because that's what we're trying to do, increase that bridge between faith and psychology. Okay, so when it comes to helping ourselves and others, these are takeaways for you. Okay, the practicality of that mental health for yourself and being able to be of support to someone else. So the key is to always listen to yourselves and others without judgment or criticism. How often do we question ourselves? Oh, if only I had. Oh, or I should have. I should, maybe no. So all that questioning, or I was just too hard on my child, or, I should have stayed and listened to my husband. He wouldn't have gotten into that, car accident or something like that. There's always that self-questioning that we do, and we tend to be a little too critical of ourselves. So if we're going to listen and if we're going to try to offer compassion to someone, we need to start with ourselves, right? The other thing is we are very inclined to try to fix things in our society and in our families and our places of work. And although that has a place, it's not always the best thing to do because, especially with mental health, it's not about fixing, although that's what the false expectation is. I'm going to bring you my child and you're going to stop those tantrums, right? You're going to tell my teenager to stop sneaking out of the house. That's not what we do. We're not going to fix that. Okay, darn it. We're not going to fix that. We're going to get to the root of things. We're going to help explore the story behind, okay? And find some core beliefs, some core values to help nurture that individuality of that person, but then also the systems around that individual. But we're not going to fix anything, and we're very straightforward about that. Yes?
Do you guys counsel and provide services for like post-abortive women?
That's an area of my expertise. So it's healing after abortion. We no longer use post-abortive, but yes. No, don't worry. You're getting educated. It's all good. Yeah. In fact, I was in Oakland Tuesday giving a training up there to the San Francisco Archdiocese. So that is an area, and I do work with the Diocese of Orange and the Archdiocese of LA as well in that healing ministry.
And what about also postpartum, just in general, postpartum?
We haven't dived into it, but we do have the skills through grief to be able to help with that. So as people come to our agency, we assess what is within our scope, right, based on the training that I have as the clinical director and my co-supervisor, that we're able to provide the help to our clients, because we are, as supervisors, we're training them, right? So we have that weekly conversations of where you're at with your client, what we can do differently, can you try this approach, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, miscarriage also, it's so minimized in our society as well, and it's a very important grief to work through. Yes?
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Don't apologize. No.
Like, I just wonder, like, out of all the, and I'm not super strong in my faith, and I'm some kind of super mentally stable guy.
Get it all out there.
Do you want a session with me? It's all good. It's all good. Sure.
Honestly, I'm curious. Out of all the patients that go to these mental health facilities, I feel a lot of people would rather go seek mental health or counseling, psychology, as opposed to doing their own duties as a devout, Catholic. I'm not saying I'm a saint, but I'm saying, if a person was to partake, let's say, for example, daily mass, free, Bible study, free, liturgy of the hours, free. Compline, evening compliance, Blessed Sacrament. It's like if they occupy themselves throughout the day with the gifts and the sacraments, confession, with things God's given us. I don't find so much room for anything else to I know that there's certain circumstances, but I just feel that would really help a lot of people. And
I agree.
And it's,
I agree. Certainly, I agree. And that speaks about the need to grow in our capacity to understand mental health and how faith can be a form of helping, right? So thank you for saying that.
It's not a form, it's the truth to help. Like people
and I agree with you.
Outside of the truth, and then they wind up
right, but it's not one or the other. There's a beautiful combination that can happen, right? So that's what I would like for you to be a little bit more open about, that there's a beautiful collaboration that can happen. And yes, we can emphasize more the faith and spirituality as we recognize that would be more beneficial to our clients. But we don't want to also minimize the tools that they can gain outside of that. Because it's a beautiful partnership without confusing them. Absolutely. Yes?
How do you get paid?
How do I? Okay. So we have very low fees, and we don't turn anybody away if they can't pay. Yes. Because we are a nonprofit, right?
Okay, so
yes.
Insurance?
No, we don't take insurance, and the majority of our clients don't pay. The majority of our clients are with us for a long time, and that's fine. Our goal is to help.
Service.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we still, if I can do a little less, we still need a lot of support. Did you have something you want to say?
No, just how many different clinicians are there?
So I have with myself, there's 3 of us that are full-time. I have 2 part-timers, and I have 14 interns. That's going to change every year. Their academic program, that changes, so I have them anywhere from 6 months to 9 months to a year.
They're doing their, is it their internship?
Yes, they're doing their internship, they're graduates. So they're in a graduate school program from a university, whether it's marriage family therapy oriented or social work oriented or licensed professional clinician oriented, and they come to us for that practical experience. Thanks for asking that. Yes?
So say you decide that someone would benefit from your services and maybe another couple services. Do you guys, then they'd be getting concurrent care, right? Do you have some way that you can sign off that you guys could talk to make sure that there is
Yes.
continuity between the three different?
Yes, so that comes to our release authorizing that exchange of conversation. Yes, without that we can't talk to anybody or acknowledge.
Nutrition.
Right, right, and that's a case manager role that we can do if we see that that's something that's going to benefit our clients. Absolutely. So case management is part of what we offer as well.
Do you only take certain graduate programs, or is it?
No. Any program is welcome as long as we create what's called an affiliation agreement, where it's that mutual understanding of what their university's role is, the interns, and our agency's role is. But I have at least 5 different schools, and every year I get a new one. So, and this is all word of mouth, which is beautiful. So back to this, the importance to communicate to those individuals that they're not alone. Remember, this is taboo, this is stigma, this is disenfranchised, right? So we're not talking about it, so there's a lot of isolation revolving how I feel, right? Even with kids, with teens, nobody's going to understand me. I'm the only one who's feeling, and we know that teenagers a lot of times tend to catastrophize, right, and exaggerate more. But when they are able to relate with other peers or just find that level of understanding, then that sense of isolation reduces. Okay? The ability to connect with others is another aspect that is important. COVID, unfortunately, created a lot of that disconnect. We see that even more with the youth, and we're trying to bring them back to that level of who do you trust? How do you trust them? What is it about them that makes them trustworthy, right? Because that has been changing negatively, unfortunately. Sleep, oh my gosh, I can't speak enough about sleep. What can I say? It's so needed, right? And we don't necessarily apply it. So monitor your sleep, where you're at, your loved ones, try to get good, strong, healthy sleep. The partaking in activities, especially outdoors in the nature, we spoke about the importance of the sun. Absolutely. Get that vitamin, right? Don't stay indoors if you don't have to. A simple walk around the block. A lot of the folks we help with are from that lower socioeconomic status, and so we can't tell them go to Disneyland, right? Not that we would ever do that, but a lot of times the misunderstanding is that I have to spend a lot of money in order to benefit from exercise, a gym membership. No, you don't have to. You can get creative, and a simple 10-minute walk around your block will suffice, right? Going to the park, playing football, basketball, soccer with your children is something that will be helpful. I mentioned about the importance of being self-compassionate, because we can be our worst judges, and that can wear a lot of unnecessary heavy weight upon our shoulders. So we want to really be compassionate towards ourselves so that we can be compassionate towards others. Recognizing those distorted thoughts to stop them and redirect ourselves. So a lot of times, like I was mentioning, the teenagers, they catastrophize, right? Oh, it's the end of the world. Today was my worst day ever, right? Nobody likes me. My friends are not talking to me. There must be something wrong with me. That's a distorted thought. There's nothing wrong with that person. There's nothing wrong with you, right? Let's explore what led you to believe this, right? A lot of times the distorted thought that we get with our faith base is God doesn't love me or God is punishing me. We know that's not coming from God, right? So we're going to help explore and redirect the thought of what is happening. Make sense? It's important for you, since you know yourself best, to keep track of the changes that are happening. Where are your thoughts? Are you having more sad thoughts than normal? Are you having a lot of fatigue to the point where you can't get out of bed? Did your eating habits change? Not because you want to lose weight, but because you lost interest in food. Those are changes that you want to keep attention to. And if you notice those in someone you care about, the same thing. Hey, I'm noticing this about you. You lost 15 pounds pretty dramatically. What's up, right? Creating short and long-term goals for yourself in terms of your mental well-being. Where are you at now, and where do you want to be in a week? Where do you want to be in 3 months? What can you do better for yourself? How can you encourage someone to do better for themselves? Please make sure you seek professional help, or you recommend that for someone you love. It's a starting point. It's not saying, oh my gosh, you're doomed, right? No, it's I care about you, I care about myself, I need to see where I'm at, right? In order to do better. Prayer is an ongoing relationship. Never stop praying. Insist. And also being able to focus on gratitude, because a lot of stuff we are weighed so heavily by the negativity that happens in our lives, our clients, so that we forget to be thankful for the little things, right? I'm thankful I found this place today because I was very stressed coming this morning. I've never been here before, but I'm grateful I made it, right? So anything that gives us gratitude and helping that see in our individuals. Of course, when somebody is, mad, angry, upset, to ask them to, well, what are you grateful for? Is like, oh, wrong timing. Don't do it yet, right? Wait for them to calm down to bring something positive about that situation. I'm grateful that you didn't lash out this time. You took more time to kind of soothe yourself. That's great. I'm grateful for that. Right? Just little things we want to perceive. It may seem like it's not a lot, but it really makes a difference. Now, a little bit in terms of mental health and children. So they tend to express those emotional challenges through behavior. Okay? We are working with kindergartens in one school that all they do is yell when things don't go their way. It's like, or they're throwing something on the ground. So we've been working with them for about 3 months. And are starting to see them being able to understand, I yell when something doesn't go my way. I'm going to stop, I'm going to count to 5, and I'm going to focus. Takes a while, but we can get there.
Sharon, does your group work with Child Protective Services?
We don't work with them because they're their own entity, but we're always consulting when we suspect child abuse. So that's a given. That's part of our ethics. When we suspect that there's abuse, we need to consult with CPS. And it happens every year. It's unavoidable, unfortunately, but it's out of a duty to protect the child and make sure that they're going to be in a safe environment. A lot of them don't pan out, which is great, but we have the duty under reasonable suspicion of abuse to call and consult with them. So if you're noticing, that they're not turning in homework, that their grades are low, it's hard for them to get out of bed. These are all behaviors that may be indicating something's up. Not that they have a diagnosis, but that's something up, right? And we can see this in our adult children as well. We always want to be curious and neutral when exploring, which is hard. What did you do wrong today? It's not helpful for anybody to open. Right? Or a lot of times we're like, well, tell me about your day. How was your day? What's a typical response we get with kids? Fine. Good. Okay, that doesn't give me anything, right? So dive in and be curious. So what was good? Tell me what was recess like for you? What did you play this time during recess? How are you handling homework? Right? So notice that these are open-ended questions. These are not yes or no answers. So we want to find ways of asking those open-ended questions, right? And I know with children, I know my family's sort of large. I have 3 at home right now. Spending that quality time, even if it's 10 minutes a day, and creating special routines with our children is very, very important. And you can think of it the same with adults, because we all need a level of connection, right? If all we're talking with our spouse is a 5-minute, how was your day? Oh, good, honey. And then we're going to bed, we're not spending that quality time with that individual. We're not nurturing that relationship. And so we need to either make a point, weekly date nights if possible, early coffee mornings, even if you're up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Sometimes I am with my hubby, to have quiet in the home and just be. Okay? We want to monitor social media with our youth. It is such a huge negative influencer. Parental controls, a lot of families don't understand them, don't know how to use them. It does have a negative influence on children. even for the fact that they're not able to relate with one another. So we have to be very careful with that. And we want to keep our children busy, productive things. Can they volunteer at a retreat center? How do we create opportunities for them to volunteer, even in small ways? You know, you can't go to a community kitchen because children are not necessarily able. Can we invite some families together, put some, I don't know, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and, you know, donate them to a local shelter or something, right? Can we do a fundraiser, whether it's a lemonade stand or, you know, get creative to help children see the needs of others, gets them outside of their comfort zone and are outside of their own sadness and gloom that sometimes they can feel, but it keeps them busy, you know, and as much as we can with sports, art, whatever it is, it's also helpful for children to have that balance, but they're also because we want them to connect and we want them to relate with others. Very special and important, being that healthy model for our children to cope. So if all I'm doing when I come home is yelling and I don't want to talk to anybody because I'm so tired, then I'm modeling that that's the way you handle stress or a hard day at work. So now I'm creating what do you call it? A wall between my child, a barrier, thank you, a barrier between my child because they see that that's the way you handle going to work. It's not healthy. Okay, and it's important for you to give yourself your downtime, don't get me wrong, but don't make your downtime 3 hours where now you miss the opportunity to bond with your child. Okay, being able to mortify your tiredness a lot of times is helpful when you want to talk with your spouse, a coworker, or your children. Smiling, even when you don't feel like smiling. That's a hard one for me sometimes. But those are little ways of being able to model how to cope with different challenges. I do a lot of verbalizing. Mommy had a hard day today. You know, I'm tired from today. I had to help someone with so-and-so. You know, just give mommy a little moment. My kids get it. Okay? And I already alluded to the value of spending quality time with their children. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could be praying together. It could be preparing a meal together, things like that. So to wrap it up for today, the invitation is for you all to do that self-assessment. Where am I at with my own mental health? How can I help someone also be more attuned to their mental wellness? What can you do better or different in your own way of keeping yourself sane in a world that sometimes feels very cold, very, well, you know what it is, right? How do you continue to nourish your faith? What grounds you? What do you want to keep doing? What do you want to add, perhaps? Some of our dioceses have a lay mental health ministry, which is beautiful. If that's something that you can partake in, absolutely. If not, it really is about starting with yourself and being able to have open conversations about someone's mental health. You know, sharing, hey, I had this topic, this is what I learned today, I'm curious to know where you're at. Something like that. A go-to resource for all of us is 211 in the diocese, in Orange County, excuse me. They are an agency that is plugged into just about everything, from housing needs to immigration help, you know, low-cost legal services to mental health. They are the main resource that we utilize to help plug in individuals. For suicide prevention, the hotline is 988. That's the new number now. So have those two numbers at least aware so that, you know, keep them handy so that you know, if anything, these are your two go-tos.
Wait, so that's, I thought it was the name of the program, so that's the actual number?
Yes, that's the actual number, 211. It's connected, I believe it's connected to Orange County links.
Like 911, but
211, yep, and then 988 for suicidal hotline, the suicidal national hotline. They made it very, before it was a 1-800, now it's 988, which is great. Any thoughts or questions about today? Anything that I can help clarify, that I can bring more information to? Yes, sir.
So back to myths and biases.
Mm-hmm.
And let me caveat first by saying, I think mental health is one of the biggest societal black holes that cascades through so many aspects of societal problems, from family, homelessness, drug abuse, etc. And that we as a community and as a society need to focus more on this, because it will have benefits immensely cascading throughout society. That being said, I've got two personal anecdotal biases or myths that are probably festering. I appreciate they're probably wrong. One is that the industry, let's put that in quotes, over-medicates. And two, an inordinate amount of the clinicians or psychologists have become that because they're wackadoodles themselves.
Wackadoodles. Can you define wackadoodle?
No offense.
Not taken, but I need you to clarify what wackadoodle means for you. Let's clarify. Let's clarify.
You have it, hello.
That derogatory.
No. I just want clarification. I'm not taking it personal. No. I just want clarification to understand you better.
That they have gotten into that as a self-medication, as a self-diagnosis process, and maybe aren't necessarily. How do you find qualified?
Oh, I thought you were going to go in that direction. Okay. So I know that, as you know, being licensed now 18 years, I've developed solid individuals that I trust, that I've gotten to know their theoretical approach, that I've gotten to know their compassionate heart, who I would specifically, and are faith-based as well, that I send to. But that's me. Right. Our diocese does have a comprehensive list, as well as clinicians that they have done their due diligence in assessing for their Catholic background and application, because a lot of us can say I'm Catholic but not practice, and they have a great list. I haven't had the opportunity to become very well acquainted with them, but I would hope that our diocese, because they trust and they've done their job, that would be a place to go. Now, a lot of clinicians tend to go private practice mode, which is sometimes an impediment for people who need that faith base to reach because of the heavy costs involved. So that's why New Hope Counseling exists, to try to be able to meet that need. But we are heavily understaffed, and there's obviously a need for the income to be able to provide for full-time employees to grow in that avenue. So if you can trust in me, I can tell you that we're going to provide a strong, helpful approach to our individuals. For some of them faith-based, for some of them not, because it's such a unique journey. But it really depends on who do you know to trust to someone else. And I'm very particular of who I send to because of the difficulties that can happen, right? But sometimes it's a trial by error type of thing. Yes?
I was going to say that, kind of piggybacking off of what he was talking about, what you were saying, is that journey in that process of trust really starts with that relationship and some of the issues of, recognizing that there are doctors out there that are just, writing the script and what have you, and not to be trusted. And you do have to take the due diligence of finding the right person. And that's where the journey sometimes starts. And that's also where sometimes the story ends, because people get hurt in that journey, lose faith, and decide they don't want to take the journey anymore. And they go off the meds, or they go off the path, and they don't get the help they need. The one thing that I really like that you talked about, I'm a retired inner city school teacher, and I still work with Rachel's Vineyard and Reef to Grace and
good. That's great.
Programs.
That's great.
But the one thing I really liked was the programs that you're doing in the parochial schools or the Catholic schools, any schools.
Yes.
Because you're educating the young people and not taking that stigma of there being an issue with mental health or problems, and providing tools and giving them strategies and making them feel good about these problems, or helping them to recognize that these mental health issues are out there.
Right.
They're in every family. Like she said, 1 to 4, if you do the math, how many of the apostles?
Right. Right.
You know, have them
Right,
do the math.
right.
So given that sense, you're talking about walking or, you know, the sacraments and all the gifts we have as Catholics. But there's other things too, you know. When they say laughter is the best medicine. So, you know, just even, you know, putting on good shows and knowing what it takes to nurture yourself.
Yes.
Kind of the homeopathic mentality.
Yes.
One of the things I used to do in the classroom, and some of you might think this is hysterical, but I used to give an attitude adjustment. And when the kids were, you know, giving me grief, and I had a box of pencils that had little happy faces on them. And I tell them, you know what? You just got way too much negative energy right now. You need an attitude adjustment. Go put a pencil in your mouth. And by them having a pencil in their mouth, they were smiling. And when
That's
you
great.
smile, you are
Sure.
actually releasing
Sure.
positive, you know,
Sure.
hormones that make you less.
So to allude to that, and I'll end with this, because I just love being at our schools, and we've been
Yes.
at some of our schools.
Here's where your hope starts.
Right, exactly, absolutely. But the SEL, social emotional learning component in schools, is huge now. It's like the buzzword. But what we see is that the secular world gets all the funding and all the support, but when it comes to private, parochial, it's so limited. And our schools have to find their own funding in order to pay the minimal amount that we ask of them. And it's a sacrifice, but it's well worth it. And I love and appreciate our principals so much for finding value in that. But our hope with the social emotional learning component is to actually be able to provide a certification towards our teachers, to have the necessary tools, because remember, we're only there once or twice a week for a certain amount of hours, right? So that they know how to walk those children through those different challenges that they have and get the concept of what we call a calming corner or a peace corner in every classroom, so that the child is educated and kind of trained when I'm in need of an attitude, what did you call it? Adjustment. I know to go to this area to grab, whether it's the pencil or the squeegee ball, or to breathe, you know, with an exercise ball or something like that. But all that requires funding and support.
Something like this, like I thought.
We do provide training to our teachers.
But no, even
Yes.
kids, like middle school kids.
Yes.
Believe it or not.
Yes.
Just an overall awareness of having
Right.
an idea of what it looks like
Right.
on paper.
Absolutely.
That some that are maybe very self, you know,
Yes.
absorbed, may look at it and go home and say, you know, and take it to
Yeah.
a place where you would have never touched them.
Right.
You know, I think what you're doing in
Thank
all
you.
respect is really a great springboard for the next
Thank you.
generation.
Thank
especially
you.
with COVID having
Well, but if
created a
anything,
black hole.
you know, it starts with you, right? It starts with you as an adult, and hopefully after today you are better informed about mental wellness, and as the next months come about, you'll hear different topics as well to not only help you, but those around you as well. Mark, thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.